How's it going, guys? Kyle here with Inforce ARC, and today I'm going to be talking to you about Inforce's latest offering. This is their ARC. So in a nutshell, what is this thing? It is an incredibly bright light that is also modular, held up to quite a bit of abuse that I'll get into later in this video in terms of what I put it through. And although it's just a flashlight, this is not the craziest thing that I could be testing. If you're not aware, it is dark 50% of the time, therefore lights and weapon mounted lights are very important in my book. You can see I have quite the collection here because pretty much anything that I rig up has to have a light at a minimum. So optic and light are the first two things to make you have an effective system. Again, with the logic that it is dark 50% of the time and the likelihood of someone or something going bump in the night is usually higher at night than it is during the daytime. But before we dive into the Inforce ARC, I do want to give a shout out to the channel Patreons. Right now, you guys are the absolute biggest supporters of the channel, which is incredible. I cannot thank you enough. And as part of my way of thanking you guys, if you're not aware, I give something away the first of the month, every month. I'm assuming by the time this video posts, I've already done the second night vision giveaway, but don't fret. There are gonna be many more awesome giveaways to come, to include lasers, thermals, you name it. We have a lot of stuff in the works. Now, Optics Planet is also a huge supporter of the channel. You can use code RANCH to save you 7% off site-wide. I'm assuming Inforce has their collection on Optics Planet. I'll annotate if I am mistaken there, but again, to save you some of that hard-earned money. And last but not least, Warhammer Armaments is also a huge supporter of the channel. I got some information about them in the link tree in the description below. Okay, so let's get into the Inforce ARC. First of all, this thing is modular, so the body itself is Scout Light compatible, meaning not only the mounting, the tail cap, and the light head. So for whatever reason you want to mix and match components, you can absolutely do so. Modularity is obviously important, but so is performance. Now, this model in particular boasts 90,000 advertised candela and 1400 lumen, which is a pretty powerful light. Now that is in part because this is the 650 LRM model, meaning it is the 18650 compatible model. You can also opt to use two CR123s, but with the 18650 you'll get up to 2.75 hours, I believe, of advertised runtime. I will overlay the specs for you guys. I'm not planning on just reading you off the brochure. We're gonna now get into what I did to actually test this light and show it head to head with some other lights. Real quick, before I get into the actual white light comparison and talk to you about the durability testing I did, I want to just talk about some noteworthy features. So first and foremost, you'll notice that the mount itself has nice oversized hardware. That means that it's going to be harder to strip. So if you don't want to spend a fortune on a light collection like what I have seemingly done over the years, then this will reduce the likelihood of you stripping that hardware and you can switch it back and forth. So for example, the Holosun Raid, which is a decent light, but the hardware was my biggest complaint. You can see how I'm already starting to strip that. So for comparison, in terms of size, I just appreciate the larger, more robust hardware. Also, larger screws, coarser threads means if you accidentally over torque it, there's less risk there as well. So I really appreciated that. And I'd mentioned Scout Light compatibility. So this mount is Scout Light footprint compatible, meaning if you want to upgrade to something like this QD Bobro mount, which I really like because it ratchets on and off. If I really wanted to, I could definitely do that. Now, not only is the mount compatible, but the tail caps are as well. Now, I saw Inforce has a Pro tail cap. I have not seen it available yet, but that will give you the dual port. So the reason I point this out is if you are used to running something like a Surefire DS00 tail cap, well, you are in luck, because it is compatible. So pretty cool. If you already have something rigged out and you want to keep it the way it is, but just upgrade to this light, this will support all the Surefire components. Now, speaking of Surefire components, it is relevant. I'm gonna bring it up. Here's the $130 DS00 tail cap. The spring, if I had to guess what was gonna fail, is gonna be the component that will eventually give away. This has to go against the recoil impulse and just the cycling of screwing it down, unscrewing it, the friction as you're tightening things, etc. That's going to be my predicted weak point. What I noticed on the Inforce is it does obviously have to have a spring for some tension, but it is capped, meaning that you're not going to be twisting that spring nearly as easily. So it's going to be a lot more resilient and less susceptible to that spring failing or breaking on you. So I noticed that. That's a pretty cool feature, pretty well thought out. Thought I'd point that out to you. Now similarly, on the light head, you don't have an exposed spring. I again point that out because here's a mod light head and the spring is exposed and so is the soldering. Now mod light is known for reliable light heads, but just looking at this intuitively, you can see where over the course of time, I'd probably put my money on Inforce's design versus the mod light design. That soldering gets weak, breaks, whatever, then you are SOL, and so is your expensive light head. So again, just pointing out some things that I noticed and giving you insights in terms of why this thing really impressed me overall. Now, in typical 4Mar Ranch fashion, I did try to gather some objective and quantifiable data for you. Personally, I can't stand when people say products are good without giving some actual reason as why. So here is something that is not opinionated and somewhat quantifiable. Now, I'm using a light meter that measures in lux. Keep in mind, lux does not correlate necessarily to candela, which is the ability for lights to punch through photonic barriers at a distance, nor is it measuring in lumens. However, when doing this test in the same and controlled manner, we can compare the intensity of the arc to the other lights in the collection. This was done 1 yard away and done exactly the same, and going a step further, I made sure all the lights were charged, and I even played around with the 3.7 volt CR123s in the lights just to see if it would make a difference. And ironically, some of the lights actually did worse with those. But here's the data, draw your own conclusions. I have the camera adjusted so that you can actually see the beam pattern and the number that we're getting, because I'm feeling you guys aren't going to believe the numbers off of this Inforce. There was 880 I saw. Ooh, there was a 952 flash. So I'm playing with the angle to try to find the peak, 926. This thing is insanely bright. A lot of punch. Output is cool, but if the beam pattern doesn't look good, then you may not like it. So just showing you some relevant illumination patterns, here is the Surefire M600V. Now one thing you'll notice, I have a shelf to the right there, so just pay attention to that in terms of the spill, how much that gets illuminated as kind of another comparison point. But here's the M600V. My camera is set to 5500 Kelvin for those of you that are fellow nerds. So it is daylight white, so if the colors appear warm or cool, it is actually that is what the eye will see. So all the camera settings are going to be constant for you for comparison purposes. So baseline here is the Surefire M600V. Here's the mod light PLHV2. So I am going to point out, here's kind of that same pattern I've been tracing, all these clips, and that spill is illuminating that shelf pretty decent there. And I point that out because we're going to switch over to the OKW head, which is supposed to be more candela. And even on this right boundary where I've been tracing, this rectangle that I see on my recording grid, you get less of that shelf. So definitely much more of a center hotspot. Here is the Holosun Raid, which actually does decent when you're using it. When you point it at a white wall, you see some of these artifacts and rings that some people were not super thrilled about. But it is another budget-friendly option and is held up to a lot of abuse, but here is that spill pattern. And this is a Malkoff. So a little warmer, decent central hotspot, and you can kind of see where that spill kind of goes out in layers. And now we'll show you the Inforce ARC. And first of all, even dead center, look at how much illumination. There's so much light coming off this wall. When I go to the right boundary of the grid I've been kind of tracing on my camera recording screen, that shelf is very well lit up, an insane central hotspot. This thing lights up the entire room while maintaining some impressive candela in the beginning. And it wasn't until comparing these that I really appreciated this Inforce light, because if this doesn't speak to not only that pretty good illumination pattern, giving you good spill while maintaining a large and impressive central hotspot, then I don't know what else will. So draw your own conclusions, but here is kind of a baseline to compare these against. Now, the next thing I wanted to do is a little bit more practical of a test. So there are some trees in the foreground and there's a distant tree at 350 yards in the background. Note to self, don't record these segments during a storm. So I'm going to give you a brief voiceover here. point out a couple things and then just sit back and let you draw your own conclusions. Now, looking at the Inforce ARC's beam pattern, you do have a good amount of flood, but you also have that nice hotspot that does illuminate that tree at 350 yards pretty well. The other thing I want to point out is the fact that the beam color is pretty clean. So good reproduction of colors here. It's not overly warm. It's not unnecessarily cool. They actually did a pretty good job with the actual color of this light, and it makes things look pretty good when you illuminate them. Now, I do want to compare it to the Modlite PLH-V2 because that is one of my preferred lights because it was a good balance in terms of flood and punch in terms of central hotspot. But honestly, the ARC definitely has me leaning in that direction now over my Modlite PLH-V2 heads. I will also compare to the OKW head, which has a very, very strong central hotspot, and it is known for its high candela, as well as the Surefire M600V. So with that, I will shut up now and let you draw your own conclusions on these different lights in a practical environment. This thing can be the brightest thing in the world, but if it doesn't hold up, I don't care. So the first thing I wanted to do, and it's the official first now that we have acquired the SCAR 17, which as of this month has, I guess, become a classic or a relic, whatever you want to call it, because they're now discontinued. But this light was put through 200 rounds of SCAR 17 recoil. It is the reciprocating charging handle, and this thing, spoiler alert, still functions. And this was also right in front of not only the gas port, which kind of bleeds out sideways, but it was right by the muzzle device. And this poor thing absolutely got blasted. I clearly did not torque it down enough, and getting near the 200 round count, it finally loosened the set screws. That is user error, but it just goes to show how nasty that recoil impulse was. Now beyond that, I said, hey, why not? I was also doing some 5.56 testing of different lasers and optics, so this thing now has over 300 rounds of 5.56 on it as well, and that was through the SCAR 16 with the reciprocating charging handles. So the snappiest 5.56 that I am aware of, because that reciprocating charging handle and that short stroke piston system, as well as the platform with probably the largest kill count of optics, lights, lasers, etc. And this thing is still trucking. So that, guys, I think that's about as complicated as I can make a flashlight review. Hopefully I met the objective of giving you the insights you need to, try this without buying it, living vicariously through me and the channel. Again, if you want to support videos like this and future videos to come, I encourage you to check out the 4Mar Ranch Patreon. That is the best way to get in touch with me and keep the channel growing and the projects getting bigger and better for you, while also standing a chance to win a giveaway item the first of the month every month. If you're still sticking around, I also want to thank you for taking the time to watch this video, and as always,